بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أهلا وسهلا بكم في كلية الآداب التي تقيم ورشة علمية بعنوان هل الإسلوبية ترف. وتأتي هذه الورشة برعاية السيد رئيس جامعة الموصل الأستاذ الدكتور كمال الدين الأحمدي المحترم، وبإشراف عميد كلية الآداب الأستاذ مساء الدكتور محمد علي محمد المحترم. ويشارك في هذه الورشة كل من الأستاذ الدكتور خالد شاكر حسين، قسم اللغة الإنجليزية كلية الآداب جامعة الدكتور، وكذلك تشارك فيها الأستاذ الدكتور وفاء عبداللطيف العالي، قسم اللغة الإنجليزية كلية الآداب جامعة الموصل، وباسم عميد كلية الآداب الأستاذ المساعد الدكتور محمد علي عفين. نرحب بالضيوف الكرام ونرحب بالمحاضر الأستاذ الدكتور خالد شاكر حسين. أهلا وسهلا بك في هذه الورشة العلمية. وأنقل المايك الآن إلى الدكتورة وفاء لتدير الجلسة. دكتورة وفاء معك المايك.
نعم. صوتي مسموع دكتور؟
نعم دكتور مسموع.
أوكي. السلام عليكم. Good evening everybody. I'm so glad to be here this evening with a very special meeting, virtual meeting on this electronic workshop with very famous, highly respected scholar of linguistics and stylistics and language studies, Dr. Khalid Shaaker of the College of Arts, University of Diqar. I want to give an idea about Dr. Khalid. We are much honored to have him here, and we were planning to have him in person to our college and to our city of Mosul, so that he can give us some lectures, some workshops, some of his ideas about the latest development in the field of linguistics and stylistics and corpus stylistics. Dr. Khalid Shaaker Hussein is full professor of corpus stylistics and currently works at the English Department, College of Arts in Diqar University. He does research in rhetoric and computational linguistics. He has published 25 academic papers and 5 books addressing a variety of topics ranging from plagiarism and source misuse in academic writing, corpus-based analysis of literary text, computational authorship, attribution to cognitive critical discourse studies. I want at the beginning, so welcome Dr. Khalid. We are again much honored to have you here and to introduce you to my colleagues at the University of Mosul, whether they are from the Department of English in any of our colleges or any other departments at the University of Mosul. Thank you so much. We are very grateful and we are very excited to listen to you within the second part of this workshop. Actually, we have made an agreement between us that I'm going to present on stylistics as a beginning. Everyone knows that I am a scholar of pure literature, but I stuck my nose into a new era, and which is the business of all scholars, which we all have to do, that we go to other disciplinaries in order to see what's going on related to our pure specialty or field of specialty, which is related actually to literature, that is called stylistics. My workshop today, let me say, it is not more than definition, not more than beginning. The heavy weight of the meeting today will be devoted to Dr. Khalid. He is the scholar of this field, and he will tell us. I expect him to tell us a lot about the idea of our workshop, which is stylistics, a luxury, and we will see how he will prove that. I myself, I know that this is true, and he will show us that. But for me, as a beginner, I am going to give you a glimpse into what's the meaning of stylistics, Is it a branch of linguistics? Is it related to literature? Is it related to linguistics? And these are the questions we are going to answer today from this part of the workshop, which is devoted to me to do today. So what is, I think someone has opened the microphone. Can you switch it off, please? Dr. Abdullah, can you switch off? Can you mute? Can you mute the microphones, Dr. Abdullah? There is some microphone which is still open. We want to... Dr. Abdullah, are you with us? There is some microphone which is making noise. ليث.
أستاذ ليث النجم
نجماوي. أستاذ ليث النجماوي. Please switch off your microphone. أستاذ ليث. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So what is style and what is stylistic? Style in general sense can be defined as the way how to do things and a particular kind, sort or type as with reference to form, appearance or character. This is actually the definition of the word style from the dictionary. And the dictionary has more than 20 comments or 20 entries to this word. And this is not related to what, this is not related directly to what we are going to define regarding the rising star of stylistics. Stylistics is generally known as the study of language in literature, according to the linguist Michael Tolan. Stylistics is generally known as the study of language in literature. So let's go to the beginnings of this word and how critics started to study the idea of criticism in literature. Actually, we have two disciplines, all of we know, linguistics and literature. These are two old-fashioned divisions of the study of language. They are no more like that. Unfortunately, they are still going. This idea or this procedure is still going on. We always ask a person, are you language or are you literature? This is no more, and we have to stop doing this. And I will show you how. So we will start with Geoffrey Leach and other books. Those who are with us now, I know there are very respectful scholars of linguistics. I want to apologize to them because I'm not going to mention all the great names of linguistics, all the great names of stylistics. I will only choose those names who are the most famous, 2, 3, 4, not more than that, in order to clarify my idea. So I will start with Geoffrey Leach and his book, which is called A Linguistic Guide to the Study of Poetry, which was published as early as 1968. This book is a pioneering study of style in poetry that attempts to arrive at an in-depth interpretation of the poems. Leach believes that the linguistic critical aspects of literary studies are complementary, the first being a tool of the second. From 1968, he said that the division into literature and language is not logical and they are complementary. They are complementary, okay? He argues that his book tries to reconcile the linguists and literary critics who were working against each other. He admits that studying a poem requires some background, biographical, social, intellectual, even historical. In other words, tackling the text away from its context and background is not an in-depth analysis of style. So I want to hint at the idea that Roland Barthes brought into the linguistic arena, which is called the death of the author. And I will come to Roland Barthes with some ideas from him in order to be refuted or to side with or to be developed. In their more detailed book, which is called Style in Fiction, published in 1981, still Geoffrey Leach, and with him Mick Short, they define stylistics as a linguistic approach to literature, explaining the relation between language and artistic functions with motivating questions such as why and how more than what. So they infuse the idea that stylistic challenges our linguistic frameworks, reveals their deficiencies, and urges us to refine them. Stylistics is an adventure of discovery for both the critic and the linguist. In other words, as I will say later on, stylistics is the bridge. It is the bridge between linguistics and literature. It is the bridge between the conflicting sides of the linguists and the critics, of literary criticism and linguistics, and their subdivisions and their development away from each other. And we will see that as well. The following slide argues in favor of defining the study of style as both linguistic and literary process. Look at this. The stylistic factors of language selected to study in a text can be grouped into two categories. Look, the stylistic factors of language. What are they? We have the user of the language, which is called the user-bound category, and the situation-bound. Every text, we have user-bound and we have situation-bound. This is in a brief, and this is very simple and even simplistic way to look at the text, whether it is verbal or written. So the user-bound factor can include the speaker's or writer's gender, idiosyncratic preferences, and regional and social background. This is on the side of the user, okay? Now, what about the situation? The situation-bound stylistic factors depend on the given communication situation, such as medium, whether it is spoken versus written, participation in discourse, whether it is monologue versus dialogue, or attitude, level of formality, and field of discourse, like technical versus non-technical fields. So, and this is related to the use of language in other disciplines like sciences and other fields of knowledge. Thus, stylistic research has identified many correlations between specific stylistic factors and language use. For example, noun phrases tend to be more complex in written than in spoken language in many speech communities. And passive voice occurs much more frequently in technical fields of discourse than in non-technical ones. We all have experience with supervising MA and PhD dissertations. We always ask our students to avoid using I or we, but to use the passive voice. So this is a style. This is a style which is scientific style. Look at stylistic how it goes into other sciences. Okay, regarding the analysis of a poem stylistically, it is usually more condensed. You know, a poem is usually limited in its size, so it is usually condensed. That's why someone like or some linguist like Geoffrey Leach, he started with the study of poetry rather than fiction. After around 20 years maybe or something like that, or 2 decades, he started to study style in fiction. So he firstly started with the study of style in the poem. As for prose, dealing with large-scale text, such as the novel, the process is more intimidating. And I am using his words. Therefore, the stylistic study of a novel can be done only in quantitative terms. This is what Short and Leach say. Some critics felt helpless studying stylistic features of a novel, such as Ian Watts, who felt so helpless in studying the style of Henry James's The Ambassador. So when what I want to say here, or what I have read from all of these resources, is that the study of large-scale text is far more difficult than studying a poem. So there have to be some other method or methodology, which is going to be the corpus. Later on, we will study this, and I think this is the other part of Dr. Khalid field, of which we are very excited to listen to him to listen to him and what he will say. Okay, Another useful example to mention here is Roland Barthes' study of Balzac, S/Z, which was published in 1970, by dividing the whole text. You know Balzac's novella, which is called Saracen. I think most of us know this revolutionary book in the realm of structuralism and post-structuralism. But I took it as an example of analyzing a large-scale text, a literary large-scale text, which he felt very difficult to do. That's why he chose a technique which is called dividing the novella into lexias. And he divided the novella into lexias, and his division of the novel or the novella into lexias is not haphazard or random at all, but he divided it on certain basics he innovated. These basics are called his 5 codes. And there's no time here or place to speak about the 5 codes, like here the hermeneutic, the pro-ioretic, the symbolic, etc. My PhD students know these 5 codes and how much we studied this book in details and how it was intimidating to read. And actually, in actual fact, they got very tired of reading its very difficult book. But after all, it is a great methodology in that it gives the seeds for the first time how to analyze a literary text on a large scale or a bulky literary text. Okay, studying the linguistic devices in any text does not follow any rules, whether grammaticality of writing or logicality of thinking. You know, in literature, we don't have rules. You know, the literary writer, whether poet or novelist, he can put the verb wherever he wants. Like, for instance, Ezra Pound, he has the theory of imagism. In imagism, he discards adjectives. He says that adjectives are ugly and they impose ideas on your reader. Leave your reader his own interpretation. Leave your reader to be inserted or to be drawn into the experience of literature without interfering on his experience. That's why grammaticality of writing or logicality of thinking are out of context in studying in the study of the stylistic analysis of any work. But rather, critics suggested what is called appropriateness. For instance, if I give you appropriateness of the context, طبعا اكو the idea of contextuality or fictionalism. I will not hint at these more specialized terms. As I told you that I am going to deal with literature, and I will be more biased in this context. So, for instance, in Teddy Hughes' poem, which is called Thought Fox, look at the 2 words, thought, fox. The speaker narrates his own experience with the creativity process, inspired by a fox appearing among the darkness of the forest of the mind, and finally the poem is printed. Teddy Hughes, you know, he is the poet famous for his use or innovative and inventive use of the animals. All his life he was writing about animals. Therefore, he is called till now the poet, the shamanist. And you know, shamanism is taken from a tribe and their tradition in wearing some clothes made like animals, and the human being wear it and he behaves like that animal. But what they choose the positive side of that animal, not the animalistic, which is the low part of the animal, but the higher part of the animal, which is higher part of a human being. Okay, so here an example of how the poet Teddy Hughes uses a style of his own, and we call it, I myself call it, the stylistic code of Teddy Hughes. He has this what is called stylistic code of his writing, of his poetry. So if we are to compare the stylistic analysis of these 2 examples, I have now 2 examples. One of them by Roland Barthes, he is the linguist, all of us we know, and his analysis of Balzac's Saracens. He called it S and slant line Z. You know, SZ, they are the names of Saracen and Zambinella, the lady who turns out to be half woman. She's half woman and half man, and the Saracen will discover that she is not a full woman, although she was very beautiful, and etc. about the castration tradition of the time. She was a woman, or she was a man castrated, and she became a woman. And Saracen, the artist, came to fall in love with her. So Roland Barthes actually tries to do away with the context of that work, away from its background, to prove his theory that it is the death of the author. But still, we find him, he couldn't do away with that idea of getting rid of the background of the literary work. So these are two works. One of them is peculiarly, I mean the analysis. The first one is peculiarly linguistic, and the second one is peculiarly literary. But look at what the idea I arrive at when I say, if we are to compare the stylistic analysis of these two examples, one can easily notice the difference in method. Barthes is linguistic-based, and Hughes' study is poetic-based. In the following decades after Barthes, stylistics emerged as the bridge between the two approaches. Okay, so stylistics is a discipline that encompasses both literary criticism and linguistics. Unfortunately, in my department, when I was teaching my PhD students, most of the linguist people, most of them, not all of them, most of the people of the linguist scholars, let me say, this is a better word, most of the linguist scholars in my department, they were telling me stylistics is a dead discipline. No, it is not a dead discipline at all. It is the vogue of the time. So stylistics is a discipline that encompasses both literary criticism and linguistics. The stylistic approach bridges the gap between the two fields, sustaining the fact that literature and language are thoroughly intertwined. Okay, so how do we perceive the two methods? This is seen in the following slide I quote from a website. Look at this. Again, this is a division between stylistics that is related to linguistics and the stylistics of the literature branch. Look how this, it is not mine, to tell you the truth. I got it from online, but I found it convenient for my discussion. Literary linguistics, look at it, studies the devices in language of literature, literary text, such as rhetorical figures and syntactical patterns that are employed to produce expressive or literary style. While literary stylistics is synonymous to literary criticism. Literary criticism rests solely on subjective interpretation of text. طبعا, the reason why those great figures of let me say structuralism, post-structuralism, deconstruction, we have also Derrida, we have Giorgia Kristeva, we have the idea or the theory of intertextuality. All of these were related to the idea that literary criticism is a highly subjective activity, and we have to do away with it in favor of more scientific, unbiased method. That's why they found that stylistics is the bridge between these two things and is the solution for this problem. Okay, so literary stylistics also decipher messages. And at the end of this part of the workshop today, I will show you how it really deciphers messages. Okay, so features of linguistic stylistics: phonology, graphology, syntax, semantics, morphology, discourse, and there are other branches actually. From the linguist angle, it is why does the author choose here this form of expression. From the literary critic viewpoint, it is how is such and such an aesthetic effect achieved through language. Look at this very important conclusion. I quote from, it is not mine, it's taken from Leach and Short. Here, when we divide stylistics into literary and linguistic, we have to know the difference or the way. Why why does the author here choose this form of expression? This is what the linguist says. From the literary critics viewpoint, it is how in such and such an aesthetic effect achieved through language. Okay. Now we will go to the devices of literature, literary stylistic devices. We have metaphor, metonymy, synecdoche, pun, irony, oxymoron, hyperbole, and many other. They are just examples. So I will go ahead. I think just some moments. Stylistic of prose. طبعا we have been talking about the stylistics in literature, and now I will go to another, but only brief. I will ask Dr. Khalid to speak about this later on. So, a pioneer work in the study of stylistics of fiction is Leach and Short, The Style in Fiction, which was published in 1981, and it was republished in 2007. Actually, I quote or I emphasize the dates because I want to tell those who think that stylistics is really dead. Look at the dates. They tell me in the department that Leach has said had spoken about stylistics, and then he did away with it, and that is wrong. Look at his book 1981, and it was reprinted in 2007, and there are so many work on what's going on in this book, which is very dynastic, which is very monolithic book. So, dealing with large amounts of text of genres like the novel, Leach and Short suggested the computational statistical method of the frequency of certain words, noun phrases, linguistic or literary, etc., using theories relating or related to phonetics, syntax, semantics, and or theories from other areas such as pragmatics, cognitive linguistics, etc. In a brief, the selection from a total linguistic repertoire that constitute a style. So in this way, we will deal with the text away from its background. This is part of the analysis of the text. We will deal with the text and what is inside it. This brought in the rise of the corpus quantitative approach to stylistic analysis, which came to be known as corpus linguistics. And of course, we have this book, Corpus Literary Stylistics, which actually I liked very much, and it is really I highly recommend it for anyone who would like to know anything about corpus linguistics, and maybe Dr. Khalid will give us better advice, but this is as much as to the best of my knowledge. You know, my knowledge in stylistics, as I told you, it is the knowledge of a beginner. So I found this book very helpful, although I got acquainted with a huge number of books and articles in the domain. Okay, so corpus stylistics, corpora is taken from corpora, is a machine computer collected data from an authentic text for language study, such as using software tools to classify and sorting out this data. This corpus linguistic data washes its hands of a human interference and ensures objective, comprehensive, and reliable results. طبعا we have in the word Microsoft, we have we can for instance look for the number of certain words in a text. For instance, my name. I want to see how many times my name is written in an essay. I just go to the word and I get the count. This is of course quantitative method, but there are software created for this the same process, but on a large scale process. And forgive me, scholars of linguists who think that my ideas are simplistic, and this is actually what I have discovered by myself. About this book, you know, the writers are Lowe, I think this is how, Bill Lowe, and Marija Milojkovic. Marija, yes, Milojkovic. Okay. I will tell you something about this book. However, some critics like Vampire warned against the loss of meaning amid this mathematical sophistication of the quantitative studies of literature, besides some language elements of textuality, such as the figurative meanings, and hence reducing the literary text into non-literary entity. Actually, this is a real problem, because when the literary text is written for its aesthetic, emotional feelings, interaction. You need to interact with what's going on in the text. So when we make it a machine-bound text, we are going to lose this aspect of literature. But for critics who are like Low and Milošević, they have given us a solution. In response to Vampire, Low and Milošević argued that the business of the corpus stylistics is the empirical confirmation of the aesthetics of the aesthetic, artistry, and meaning of the literary text, depending on one's intuition. In a brief, the corpus-based approach and the intuition-based approach are not mutually exclusive. Look at the very last sentence, very simple. Look at how I use very simple sentences. In a brief, the corpus-based approach and the intuition-based approach are not mutually exclusive. It means that the role of the critic is still there. It is not annihilated. It is not eradicated, cannot be eradicated. Your feeling, your aesthetic feeling towards what you are putting in the software should not be eradicated by the machine or the machinery process you are depending upon in singling out certain words or certain phrases for analysis. Okay, so they are not mutually exclusive. For example, I have seen a very nice example. I have stumbled upon a very great name actually from his works. He is called Richard Curtin. Actually, I found him on the ResearchGate. He has tens of papers on stylistic corpus linguistics. Look at this example, which I took from his corpus or from his writings. A stylistic analysis of E.E. Cummings. You know, he is an American poet of the 1950s and 80s. طبعا E.E. Cummings was known for his disregard of punctuation marks. Even the proper names of his characters, he writes them in small letters. Even his name, he never uses punctuation marks. And therefore, you can see that his sentences are open-ended. He doesn't use full stop. He doesn't use capital letter. He doesn't use even, but only rarely, on very rare basics. So in his poem, which is called, look at Maggie and Millie and Molly and May. Look at these. This is the title of a poem carrying the name of 4 girls, which was published in 1958. So this study by Richard Curtin is a good example of stylistic analysis. Curtin reviews all the 4 available critical readings of this poem and shows how all of them. طبعا he has collected a repertoire of all the studies of this poem in the realm of literary criticism. He found them as 4. All of them are 4. So he shows that how all of them could not touch closely any of the linguistic features of the poem that help provide more insight into the interpretation. Reviewing the previous analyses, which were on the symbolic, allegorical, religious, and psychological levels, Curtin shows that they were limited. Still, they were limited. Curtin highlights the sonic, syntactic, lexical, and rhetorical schemes, besides the use of parallelism. Parallelism is a very well-known linguistic entity of a poem or device. He says that none of these studies mentioned the relationship between sound and meaning, or rhythm to syntax, or to rhetoric. The poem runs as follows. I will not read the poem because we don't have time. Look at the poem. I just want you to look at it, because part of Dr. Mu'ayyad Tahsin knows that we will work on how the text is written on the page, how the the words are written on the page is part of its meaning. Look, Maggie and Millie and Molly and May, these are names of the girls. Look at how many lines we have, how many couplets. One, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we have 4 girls and we have 4 couplets. For each girl, 1 couplet is devoted. The last 2 couplets, they are related to the idea he wants to convey to us. If we read it, you will find that the poem is absolutely on the literal meaning. It's very, very easy. But on the allegorical, symbolic, semantic, linguistic, stylistic, it's not that easy. So I don't have time for this, and I think I have taken around more than 30 minutes. This is the time I promised Dr. Khalid I will take from his lecture, just to give this beginning, and I hope that it is pleasing for anyone who is a beginner like me. And I know that some who are well-grounded in linguistics, and I think my colleagues are many who are well-grounded in linguistics, they know that I have maybe made some mistakes. So please forgive me if I have made some mistakes, and Dr. Khalid also may forgive me for this, but this is what I knew about stylistics, and I promise myself that it will be my domain for my following studies, inshallah. So this is the simple reference. Actually, I read more than 20 references, but I chose only these very important ones. Thank you so much. I will not open discussion now for our listeners, but I will give now the floor to Dr. Khalid to give us his synopsis, not only about what I have said, but also about what he has in his code, which must be very exciting for us. Dr. Khalid, the floor is for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Wafa. You have done greatly, actually, and you have given a very brief and elegant introduction. Thanks so much. Though I think you have been extremely biased towards literature. Anyway, actually, before starting my lecture, you have mentioned a very good example about the nature of the relationship between literary theorists and linguists or stylisticians. You have mentioned Roland Barthes. Roland Barthes provides an excellent example of a literary theorist with his famous theory of the death of the author, and the way a stylistician responded to this view. A very famous and well-respected stylistician called Elena Semino. And the way she has responded to Roland Barthes' theories gives us a very good example about the controversial nature of the relationship between literature and linguistics. Anyway, like always, I like starting my lecture from the title itself. The title reads like this: Is stylistics a luxury? My argument that stylistics is very far from being a luxury. It is not. But what does it mean to call a discipline or an area of investigation a luxury? I think to answer this question, is stylistics a luxury, actually requires us to consider 6 more questions. Then after answering these 6 questions, then we will be in a good position to deal or to address this huge and basic question: is stylistics a luxury? So I think we almost all agree that describing stylistics as a luxurious area of investigation must involve that stylistics doesn't help much in addressing the big questions in both literature and linguistics. Well, I'm extremely scared, actually, to go through a hilarious attempt to satisfy your curiosity by providing you with, oh my God, a clear-cut inventory or list of these big questions in both literature and linguistics. Who dares? Nonetheless, I might find in-between way. In other words, I might be reckless enough to approach not the big questions in literature and stylistics, but the biggest questions in literature and stylistics. Questions that we all pretty much sure of their essentiality and genuinity in literature and linguistics. By these questions, I mean only two exceptionally daring inquiries. First, what is literature? Then, what is language? So, the question here is not, is stylistics a luxury, but rather, can we approach these two dangerous questions without recourse to stylistics? I think we can't do that. Okay, let's see. Now, what is literature? Or what is literariness? The question, what kind of definitions we could have of literature or literariness without stylistics? I mean, far from stylistics, we could have only two types of literature definitions, broadly speaking. Of course, I'm pretty much sure that we got a bunch of definitions for for literature. But broadly speaking, without a recourse to stylistics, we might end up having two types of literature definitions. Either, I mean, literature can be defined either culturally relative definitions, we might have culturally relative definitions, or we might have value judgment definitions. What does that mean? Well, this gives literature a relative identity linked to a relative cultural context. Thus, what looks like literary in one culture could be not in another. By the way, I highly recommend every one of you interested in this cultural context of literature to read a fascinating book entitled Shakespeare in the Bush, which is written by a famous American anthropologist called Laura Bohman. She went to Nigeria and she has translated simply some of Shakespeare's plays to a tribe in Nigeria, and she has observed the way they have responded for it as being high literature or low literature. Anyway, this, as for the value judgment definition of literature, it considers it to cover exclusively those writings that possess high quality or distinction, forming part of the, the so-called fine writing tradition. Well, this type of normative definitions is popularized, and for example, you will find it in Encyclopedia Britannica, which classifies literature as, I'm quoting now, the best, what is literature? It is the best expression of the best thought reduced to writing. I put two lines under the words best. And you can find a very good consideration of this point in a book written by Bissaus called Critique of Poetics. Thus, this type of attempts to identify what constitutes literature looks problematic and extremely far from, the slightest sense of objectivity. It looks as if anything can be literature within its appropriate cultural context. And anything that could universally be literature, it still has the potential to be excluded, since value judgments can change over time. Therefore, it is only, this is my basic argument. It is only by virtue of stylistics that literature could be identified as a subject of objective investigation. It is only by virtue of stylistics that literature has had its own distinguished identity on the grounds of observation and description of the literary language. Now, the question is, we got a new question. What kind of definitions does stylistics offer to literature? Stylistics approaches the question of what literature is by identifying, simply speaking, by identifying the distinctive features of the very concept of literariness. Thus, stylistically speaking, the question is slightly modified into what does constitute literariness rather than literature. The answer stylistics offers to this question summarizes actually the whole history of the stylistic theory up to its up-to-date trends. In a word, I'm going to summarize, I'm going to give you a panoramic view, a panoramic definition of what literariness or what constitutes literariness. As long as this language, the literary language, shows at least, in a word, literariness is a property of language. As long as this language shows at least 5 features. Okay, we should go through what? 5 features. If we find these 5 features or some of them in any language, this language is a literary one. What are these features? First, there should be what? This language should have what? Formal distinction, which is related to theories or the features of foregrounding via parallelism and deviation, as being raised by the Russian formalists like Tchaikovsky. The second point is the representational distinction, which is related to defamiliarization via foregrounding, as being raised by Mukarovsky and Jakobson, actually. The third feature, any language which is supposed to be literary, it should trigger specific competence of readers in understanding the fictional world of the text. This is the major argument of cognitive stylistics. The fourth feature is related to a sort of high status in the society where this language is produced and read, which is related to the genre analysis and the distinction of literature into elite literature and popular literature, or high literature and low literature. The last distinctive feature of a literary language suggested by stylistics goes like this. This language, if it was a literary language, it should focus on the content, the message, for its own sake, this is the major argument of Cook and Jakobson and his concept of the poetic function. Well, these 5 distinctive features of a literary language identify literature or literariness in terms of form, reading experience, function, and the prototypicality. Now, let's move on for the second question. Having finished my work with the way stylistics defines literature, I move on to show how stylistics contributed so much to the biggest question in linguistics, which is, what is language? Language is a process of relating signs to particular meanings. I argue that this very activity of relating is by itself nothing but style. Therefore, I would say that meanings are universal and commonly shared almost by all speech communities. But these communities, they show, what can we call it, their own characterized style of signifying these mutually available meanings. That is to say, for example, the concept or the meaning of chair is signified as kursi in Arabic, chair in English, sella in Spanish, chaise in French, and so on and so forth. Remember that one of the broadest definitions of style goes simply like this. What is a style? Style is a manner of doing or presenting things. It is, I think, another variation of saying style is a manner of doing or presenting not things but meanings, and through what? Through semiosis, or what we call it, you know, the process of signifying. Actually, I might dare enough to say then language is nothing but style, and the style is nothing but language. I kindly ask every one of you to adopt whatever definition of language you like, and try only, you know, try replacing the word language in this definition with the word style, and tell me whether a huge difference is being made. Speaking more specifically, no definition of language, no matter how solid and rigorous it appears, can avoid the notion of language as a repertoire of choices made by users every time they utter or write a word. What language could be, according to Holiday, but a bundle of semiotic systems, each with its own repertoire of options to be offered and selected by users to signify essentially the same meaning through different linguistic choices, whether in terms of modality, transitivity, or even textuality. Sorry. The linguistic choices I make right now, this is a practical example. The linguistic choices I make right now while I am speaking to you constitute and define not only my language, but more significantly my style as well. Frankly speaking, I find myself most of the time extremely attracted to the way Holiday defines language and the proper domain of linguistics accordingly. For Holiday, language is a meaning potential, and by extension, he defines linguistics as the study of how people exchange meanings by languaging, or to me, simply by stylizing. After I have given you, hopefully, a quick, though precise, I hope that it was a pervasive impression. I've given you a pervasive impression about what kind of contributions are made by stylistics to both literature and linguistics. I think now we could be in a position to realize why stylistics matters. But is that all? Of course, no. The question, why does stylistics matter, requires some more substantial or sustainable answers. Thus, the question is still raised now. In fact, not only one question, but more than 2 or 3. Like, why does stylistics matter at all? Why is stylistics still worth doing? Why shouldn't we stop doing it? You know, the amazing growth of stylistics over the last, something like the last 50 years has enriched this field of investigation with a highly appreciated toolkit of linguistic description techniques. This stylistic toolkit is applicationally exceptional, as it can be used in 2 directions. On the one hand, the tools of stylistic analysis can assist in the interpretation of literary and non-literary text. And of course, this would contribute a lot to the critical theory. On the other hand, the same tools of stylistic analysis can crucially help test or refine linguistic models, and hence, this would contribute a lot to the linguistic theory. To give you a culture-specific example, almost all of the interpretations of the Quranic text are but a product of the Arabic stylistic or rhetorical toolkit. At the same time, most of the stylistic analyses of such a sacred text have tested and actually refined the Arabic linguistic theory in return. After all, this would give stylistics a solid place within linguistics and literature. It essentially provides both theories of language and interpretations in a way that complement both, just like Dr. `Wafa has mentioned. So this complementary view of both the theoretically oriented linguistics, or what might be called sometimes context-free linguistic theories, and the subjective, impressionistic, and sometimes intuitive critical interpretations. We should realize that without stylistics, we wouldn't be capable of understanding the way a text means. It is only by virtue of stylistics that utterances, whether literary or non-literary, are acknowledged, recognized, and understood within the context of their own, extra-linguistic parameters, such as time, place, culture, and cognition, of course. All these parameters are deeply tied up with the way a text we read makes its own sense and meaning. So far, if what I have said so far wouldn't put you in a position to realize how much stylistics matters to our life, then I need every single one of you to remember simply three things. The first thing, much of our lives is driven by texts. Who would deny this? I mean, my life and your lives are driven by texts whose interpretations could have us actually killed in something like the unfortunate sectarian conflicts, as it is the case of the Iraqi bloody sectarian conflict after the American invasion 2003. Believe it or not, a solid stylistic analysis could resolve and settle down a lot of historical, religious, and political conflicts based on certain stylistically ungrounded and unfortunate interpretations of sacred texts like Al-Quran, Hadith, As-Siyar, Nahj al-Balagha, etc., etc. So please remember this point, and then you will find how much does stylistics matter. The second point you need to remember, that much of our lives is conditioned and negotiated through language. It is true that language is well described already, whether in terms of structure by descriptive linguistics or in terms of context by discourse analysis and pragmatics. Nonetheless, the textual meaning in particular cannot be described neither structurally nor contextually without the interdisciplinary stylistic insights with their deep-rooted foundations in literary studies and the linguistic arsenal of language description. The third point that you need to remember, which is a practical one. I mean, on the ground, stylistics is taught and researched in university departments of language, literature, and linguistics all over the world. The highly appreciated academic status of stylistics is most definitely reflected in the number of its dedicated book-length publications, research journals, international conferences, symposia, and associations, especially PALA, which is the Poetics and Linguistics Association. Remember that modern stylistics is amazingly growing. It is richly open for new subdisciplines to come where stylistic investigations are, enriched and activated by theories of discourse, culture, cognition, society, computer science. Thus, remember, feminist stylistics, cognitive stylistics, discourse stylistics, Koba stylistics, as Dr. Wafa has mentioned, all these are but a few of the established branches of contemporary stylistics. What is more, stylistics has also become a much valued method in even language teaching and language learning in an established branch called now pedagogical stylistics. All this growth gives so much for the current health of stylistics and reminds us of how much it matters within the orientations of the modern scholarship. I think now we need to move on further and figure out where stylistics is headed. So we need to answer this question. We need to pose this question. What are the current and the future trends in stylistics? The flexibility of approach and open-mindedness made stylistics actively interdisciplinary and responsive to theories and models from other fields without duplicating or replacing them. Nevertheless, no matter what branch of stylistics you are concerned with, the focus is always put on the process of communication, which places the text at the center of its concerns with a sort of consideration of the relationship between writer and text, or reader and text, or even the wider context of production, reception of these texts. Thus, stylistics actually shares boundaries with a variety of long-standing disciplines, producing its own theories and lines of investigation. I will keep on with only the up-to-date trends of contemporary stylistics, the contemporary stylistic investigation. Today, stylistics shares boundaries with cognitive psychology and cognitive linguistics in a highly productive trend of cognitive stylistics, where the focus is shifted from the text to the reader. Stylistics shares boundaries as well with computer science and artificial intelligence, producing two extensive lines of stylistic investigation related to both corpus stylistics and stylometrics. The same goes with the pragma stylistics, or the integration of pragmatics and stylistics, translational stylistics, feminist stylistics. As for the emerging and what might be called the future trends in stylistics, they show 7 exciting developments in the lines of stylistic investigation. We have creative writing stylistics, experimental reader response stylistics, movies stylistics, multimodal stylistics, stylistics of comics, stylistics of hypertext fiction, and even the up-to-date trend or development which is called cognitive neuroscience stylistics. These 7 developments in stylistic scholarship point out where stylistics is headed and where it might very well be 20 or so years from now. Now we move on for a 5th question, which is related to who are the prominent figures in stylistics? Who is doing the stylistics, or who has been doing the stylistics? Let's have some examples of prominent figures and exceptional researchers in stylistics who could be already familiar to you regardless of your research interest or your, the area of your specialty or in which field you have major. First, we have Roman Jakobsen, with all his pure linguistic contributions to, the theory of phonology, distinctive features theory, psycholinguistics. Roman Jakobsen, since the 1920s, focused on defining the qualities of what he termed poetic language. Besides his great publications in pure linguistics, such as Fundamentals of Language, Phonological Studies, Description and Analysis of Contemporary Standard Russian, Child Language Aphasia and Phonological Universals, the Framework of Language, etc. Nonetheless, his major contributions in stylistics were tremendous and foundational. He wrote a lot of seminal works in stylistics, such as Style and Language, Language and Literature, On Verse, Its Masters and Explorers, or his famous paper, Closing Statement, Linguistics and Poetics, etc., etc. A second prominent figure in stylistics is somebody I'm pretty much sure that most of you are quite familiar with, Michael Halliday. Should I remind you of who Halliday is? He's the founder of a prestigious school of linguistics called Systemic Functional Linguistics, or abbreviated into SFL. Nevertheless, since he has published his stylistically revolutionary paper on William Golding's novel, The Inheritors, a whole branch of stylistics has been, founded and called Hallidian stylistics. Another prominent figure called Geoffrey Leach. Who is among you not quite familiar with the great textbook on English grammar called A Comprehensive Grammar of the English Language? Remember, Leach contributed to this mammoth project together with Randolph Quirk, Greenbaum, and Swartwick. What else? Contributed as well to, Longman Grammar of Spoken and Written English together with Douglas Biber. These books of grammar, I think you agree with me, these textbooks of grammar have been broadly regarded as providing an authoritative standard account of English grammar. Of course, not to mention his contributions to semantics, pragmatics, corpus linguistics. Still, Leach has written extensively on the stylistics of literary text. His two books, one of them has been mentioned by Dr. Wafa, thanks to her. His two books, A Linguistic Guide to English Poetry, and his second book, Style and Fiction, are among the most influential books written on stylistics. Who else? We have David Crystal. Though he is a star author in English language learning and teaching, in clinical linguistics, forensic linguistics, he nevertheless became a well-known landmark of a stylistic trend after he has authored his great book with Davy entitled Investigating English Style. Well, it seems a long list, doesn't it? Who else? We have Widdowson, Stockwell, Semino, Culpeper, Toulon, etc. So, to wrap it all up, we need to pose one last question. Are there any academic prestigious journals on stylistic investigation? Remember, one significant sign that the field of stylistics has been fully established and matured is the number of journals that support it. For example, we have the following journals. We have Style, Journal of Literary Semantics, Language and Literature, Poetics. All these are but journals of high quality in which linguistic and literary studies come together under the umbrella of stylistics. Of course, not to mention the highly respected academic series of Cambridge handbooks that published Cambridge Handbook of Stylistics, and of course, beside the Routledge Handbook of Stylistics. Now, a last word. Is stylistics a luxury? No. Stylistics is most definitely a necessity, so much in the same way linguistics and literature are. Thank you so much for being patient and having all this time long listening to what I have said. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Khalid, thank you so much for all the information that you have given us, the names or the titles of books, the names of the scholars. To tell you the truth, I came across most of them and I stumbled upon their books and articles, but maybe because of the shortage of time and lack of a place here, I couldn't mention everything, but I think you mentioned everything in a brilliant way. and it comes from a scholarly figure, a specialist one.
You have done great, Dr. Wafa.
Oh,
you have done great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it also. I think now we can open discussion. Dr. Abdullah, are you here? Can you help us open the discussion, or any question the audience would like to address us with? We will be more happy to answer. Dr. Abdullah, are you here? Are you listening?
نعم دكتورة، معي
نعم.
دكتورة.
نعم.
دكتورة، لا توجد أسئلة في الشات، لكن
نعم.
من يحب أن يقدم السؤال مباشرة إليك فليتفضل.
نعم. Yes, okay. Any question? Dr. This is very special moment. We have Dr. Khalid here. Please ask him whatever you like about this very revolutionary and very important subject of stylistics. I hope that everyone is convinced that stylistics is the vogue of the time, and it is the umbrella of so many fields of study, whether it is pragmatics or applied linguistics or any studies in language. Yes, please, who has any question? I think no one.
Okay, it's okay, Dr. Wafa.
It's okay. I think no question.
I think I need to discuss one point with you.
Yes,
I'm sure that you are quite familiar with Roland Barthes' concept of the death of the author.
Yes, of course. I taught it for my PhD students.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Yes. Since you are major in literature, you must be quite familiar with this concept, the death of the author, in which he has regained the role of the reader as the author.
Exactly.
So, according to Roland Barthes, the reader himself contributes a lot to the interpretation of the text, and it's the time to change the focus from the reader to the author. Remember, Dr. Wafa, this theory belongs to criticism.
Yes.
And doesn't belong to linguistics.
Exactly.
Suddenly, a very well-respected stylistician called Elena Semino in Lancaster University, she has proved this critical theory in a very nice way in cognitive linguistics, or in cognitive stylistics, actually. She has given a distinction, and she has explained the way we make sense, we make meaning, we make sense out of what we are reading. She said, here we have two stages. We have to make a distinction between the text and the reader. The text projects meaning, but the reader actually constructs meaning.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why every
work... This is what you have said about the complementation roles between literary critics and the stylisticians.
Exactly. And every literary work has a number of interpretations according to the number of readers.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And of course, we should remember as well, Dr. Wafa, that, I mean, sometimes, unfortunately, most of the people have this unfortunate misconception that stylistics deals with literature simply as a source of data. And they talk of stylistics as if it was only, you know, they give it a methodological perspective. But no, stylistics actually has redefined a lot of some literary concepts which are used in the literary criticism. So it's not, it doesn't deal with literature as only simply a source of data to be analyzed. Actually, it contributes a lot to the literary theory.
Exactly. Doctor, a few days ago, I attended a workshop or a lecture, whatever it is called. Someone, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. He was brilliantly talking about mathematics and the use of stylistics is mathematics, and the science of mathematics and how they are used with Arabic. And I was amazed by what he was saying, that it is called stylistic mathematics or mathematical stylistics. So stylistics is everywhere.
Yes, actually, this branch of investigation, Dr. Wafa, is called stylometrics. And I've got already 2 papers on this area.
Yeah, okay. We would be much honored, Dr. Khalid.
The honor is mine.
To get acquainted to what you have written. 25 papers is a huge, and 3 books, mashallah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, and thank you for the personal of Al-Mosul University, and say hi for every single colleague of yours.
Thank you so much. It is our luckiness and our honor to have you. Doctor,
thank you so much.
I have my
دكتورة وفاء، هناك أسئلة في الشات.
نعم هناك أسئلة في الشات. أوكي. أسئلة في الشات. Let me see it.
Can I ask a question, please?
What is the relationship between stylistic and pragmatics, Dr. Khalid?
Yeah, of course. Well, this is a branch, an established branch called the Pragma Stylistics.
Yes.
And here we can take the contributions made by pragmatics in order to describe the interactional communicative activity, the exchange of the roles in a conversation, the way, there is a bunch of theories suggested by pragmatics to deal or to explain or to describe a sort of text called the exchange or the conversation. This theory has been taken and borrowed from pragmatics, and it has been applied by very famous stylisticians, especially by Culpeper, to describe, to give certain interpretations and characterizations of the exchanges which are described in a drama or in plays, especially in Shakespeare. I would recommend the person who has asked this question to go through Culpeper's perspective of dealing with the Pragma stylistics, because he got a huge project concerning dealing with Shakespearean texts in terms of the pragmatic contributions.
Okay. Dr. Khalid, I have a question for you myself. From my experience with teaching PhD students of linguistics, whenever they try to arrive at a title for their PhDs or MA thesis or papers, the other linguist specialists, they ask them, are you working on applied? Are you working on pragmatics? Do you think that these questions are still valid, or this is a world of multidisciplinary knowledge that is embedding the domains of knowledge everywhere in the world? What do you think about this question?
I entirely agree with you. I mean, right now, this type of questions, I wouldn't say they are invalid, but they are inappropriate. Why? Because, I mean, doing pure linguistics is history right now.
Oh,
we
yes.
should take into consideration the huge interdisciplinary context of doing research right now. And even Dr. Wafa, right now, they are not using the term interdisciplinary, but it has been transformed into transdisciplinary.
Exactly.
So there is a deep dialogue between the branches of linguistics, and we are not in a position anymore to isolate pragmatic research from stylistic research, or the contributions made by applied linguistics from the contributions made by the literary theory.
Thank you so much for this answer. I have been trying to convince many of my colleagues, not all of them, about this, but still they think that we have to isolate between these, and we have to devote one field of knowledge, our work, and not to mix between them. So thank you so much.
I have a contribution. Dr. Wafa?
Dr. Baqsem, yes, please.
Yes.
Dr. Baqsem, yes.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening to you too.
Yes.
I'd like to thank Professor Abdallatif and Professor Shaker for providing this very good workshop to talk about this hotly debated area in linguistics and literature. Professor Wafa''s contribution was literary oriented, whereas the contribution of Professor Khalid Shaker was probably more linguistically oriented. I have a follow-up, in fact. My follow-up will be an all-inclusive one. I'm not going to provide a definition, but an understanding of what stylistics is about and how it is expected to be viewed. I understand the style as a way of saying or doing something, a way of eating, a way of speaking, a way of teaching and talking. So style, in the generic sense, is partly inbuilt and partly acquired. Style, in the generic sense, is the personal choices which are usually done unconsciously. These choices, constantly repeated, when constantly repeated, they become more and more part of the person. An important fact concerning the style is that although it is idiosyncratic, it is culture-bound because it is affected by gender, by race, by education, by affiliation, occupation, place of residence, etc., etc. A distinction should be made between group style and individual style. Group style reflects group characteristics like slang, jargon, dialect, etc. By contrast, in individual style, stylistic variation is reflected in the dialect of individuals who speak the same dialect and language, thus reflecting the individual characteristic of speakers and writers. A very important distinction was made by McNamee, 2002, between inter-writer variation and intra-writer variation. This distinction is highly important in stylistic studies.
Excuse me, may I interrupt you?
Yeah, yes, please.
Well, I mean, I think, sorry for interrupting you. What you have said is great and very interesting. Nevertheless, if Dr. Wafa has been literary oriented and me, if I've been little bit linguistically oriented, you yourself now is sociolinguistically oriented.
Not in the
Don't
sense
you think
of
so?
linguistics. Yeah, I said it's an all-inclusive approach to science.
I can see that the terms that you have just mentioned related to jargon, individual, remember, one of the definitions of style is what? Is a variation of language. It's a linguistic variation which can be recognized as accent, pronunciation, dialect, jargon, register. So
absolutely.
I of course have a huge respect to the contributions made by sociolinguistics, but remember, this is the problem of stylistics. Everyone, in fact, this is not a problem, this is a strong point in stylistics. It is a confluence, it is a meeting place for different researchers with different orientations. Okay, so you might be sociolinguistically oriented or literary oriented or cognitively oriented, you have a place within a kingdom called stylistics.
This is why I say that my contribution is an all-inclusive one.
Okay.
Well, another important point is that within stylistics, we have three major branches. In addition, of course, to literary stylistics, we have linguistic stylistics, we have clinical stylistics, and we have forensic stylistics.
I was sorry for making a second interruption, Doctor, but
okay.
I have a huge objection about this misconception of classifying stylistics into literary stylistics, linguistic stylistics, clinical stylistics. Actually, Doctor, what we have always, we have what? The same toolkit of description techniques. We have always the same descriptive or description techniques. And we apply the same techniques on what? On different types or different genres of the text. So if we apply the same stylistic techniques on a literary text, do we have the right to call this application literary stylistics? And if we apply it on a clinical text, do we have the right to call it or to call this application a clinical stylistics? No, in fact, stylistics is still the same, but these types are not, they do not belong to stylistics, rather they belong to the text which is being analyzed.
You are absolutely right, but these are offshoots of stylistics. Just like we have pragmalinguistics, we have forensic linguistics, we have applied linguistics, etc. So these are sub branches of stylistics. In fact, I'd like to provide a full picture of stylistics to the listener. So if you excuse me, I'd like to continue my contribution or my, let us say, my follow-up.
Nevertheless, Doctor, I have expected you to have a question.
No, I said
I don't know, Dr. Wafa.
My contribution might either be a question or a follow-up. So my contribution is a follow-up.
I mean,
Dr. Khalid,
we could have some, yes.
Dr. Khalid, excuse me, Dr. Baqsem,
yes.
I want
yes.
to introduce him to you. He is a professor, doctor of
yes.
our department, and he is, let me say, he is the biggest head of linguistics in our department. And he is a great...
I'm so glad.
Yeah, yes. And he is a great, let me say, patronizer of stylistics. So I would love to see
great. Then you have all the time, Dr. Baqsem.
He is the only one. He is the only one who agrees with me regarding stylistics. Everyone says that stylistics is dead.
Yeah.
So I would love
but Dr. Wafa,
yes,
Dr. Wafa, I wouldn't call our lecture, today's lecture, it looks like a defense of stylistics. Are we in a position to defend the stylistics? Stylistics hasn't been attacked so far. And if there were any attacks, excuse me for my language, these attacks are made by people who have very low knowledge of what a stylistics is. So we are not defending stylistics here.
Yes.
For
me, I
Go
should
ahead,
defend
Dr.
it.
Baqsem.
For me, I should defend it. Yes, Dr. Baqsem.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, the topic of the workshop, was, is a stylistic luxury? I absolutely answer no, it isn't. And my contribution is in this point. I am not going to talk about linguistic stylistics, but I'd like to highlight literary, clinical stylistics and forensic stylistics. Clinical stylistics, in fact, studies speaking, the styles of speaking, writing, styles of writing of people, suffering from different types of disorders. For example, Ritter syndrome, schizophrenia, autism, or aphasia. Here, grammatical stylistics is basically concerned with studying how words, how grammatical structures have been selected, how pragmatics and stylistics cooperate in identifying characteristic features of people who suffer from such disorders.
Dr. Baqsem, can I interfere to tell you, to ask you something?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we are curious also to have you one evening to give us a lecture on this subject that I'm talking about. Is it okay to
This is a great idea.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, it's a long discussion, Dr. Baqsem.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, our pleasure also, inshallah. Thank you so much. Do you have a question or that's all?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baqsem.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baqsem.
Dr. Khali, there is thank you so much. We have a question from someone. He says that is it possible to teach stylistics at the Department of Translation at the BA level? For me, I would say yes. What do you think?
Yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, all what we need is just the appropriate personnel with a good background in stylistic theories.
Exactly.
I mean, remember, translation is still a process which is carried out with a specific style. Remember, we have translational style and the style of translation, or the translation of a style and the style of translation. The style of translation belongs to the translator himself, and the translation of a style belongs to the text himself. So there is a huge, a well-established branch of stylistics called the translational stylistics, and of course it can be integrated within the syllabus of BA syllabus or undergraduate syllabus of the students.
To tell you the truth, I have read about that translational stylistics, very wonderful domain.
Yeah, it is
quite new. Yeah. Okay, there is another question. Is it a general concept or is it connected with literature deeply? Stylistics.
Which concept? Stylistics.
Yeah, of course it is connected deeply with literature, but it is not only with literature, with all fields of life. Dr. Khalid, I am a good. I can say that I am a staunch listener of Donald Trump's speeches. Every day I follow his presses. So I always think that why should not we collect in a corpus way, a corporal way, his speeches and make a study, and we will pick up his the elements of his character, the elements of his policies. We can do that. Yes.
Okay, why not? But considering the question raised about the concept of style, Dr. Wafa.
Yes.
Dr. Wafa, Roland Barthes himself defines the style in a very wonderful way. He says, style is the man, and the man is a style.
Yes.
So actually, our humanity is recognized through the concept of style. Style cannot be an exclusive property of literature or of linguistics or of fashions or of music. It is a huge, a tremendous and pervasive concept that cannot be excluded or taken exclusively by a specific area of interest or field of investigation. It cannot. It cannot. Remember, our humanity is recognized through the concept of style. When we say, where Roland Barthes says, style is the man, and the man is a style.
Yes, exactly. Yes. There is a simple question about what is the difference between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. I will give the floor for you to define it. It's very easy to. I think they are synonymous. Interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary.
Well, they are not that much synonymous.
Yeah.
You know, interdisciplinary. This means there is, in fact, these two terms are taken from critical discourse analysis, and they have been well investigated by Fairclough. with interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary. With multidisciplinary, you know, we can bring some disciplines, let's say physics and chemistry. They can work, no, they can work in the same investigation environment, but there are still some limits between the investigation lines of chemistry and physics. But this is with what multidisciplinarity. As for interdisciplinarity, no, the limits are gone. There is a sort of integration between the investigation lines, as it is the case in cognitive stylistics. You know, in cognitive stylistics, the lines, the borders, or the boundaries have disappeared between cognitive psychology and cognitive linguistics.
Yes, exactly.
I think this is the difference.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great answer.
You're welcome.
Another question: what are the borderlines between stylistics and discourse analysis? I think this is a good question. What is
it is a good question. I mean, all these questions, by the way, are very interesting and fascinating, actually. Yes, the difference between the stylistics and what?
Discourse analysis.
Yes, discourse. Well, you know, in discourse analysis, actually, we have a branch of stylistics called discourse, stylistic discourse analysis, or sometimes called the critical stylistics. Here in discourse analysis, we take the contributions made by, for example, Fairclough, Van Dyke, especially, Weddock, okay, and they give to the stylistic analysis a new context. This context is called power, ideology, institutions. So in critical or in stylistic discourse analysis here, we take the style and we add some contributions. We add a new context, a new dimension to study style. This dimension is related to what might be called the manipulation of language as a result of some power exercises or practices. Okay, so in discourse, in fact, there is no big difference between the two. There is an integration between stylistics and critical discourse analysis, especially in which we study style under one new context, which is called power and ideology.
Okay. One more question.
Go ahead.
Dunya says, some accuse, she means, I think, stylistics.
This is a strong word, accuse.
Yeah, accuse it as a science without theory, just like pragmatics or other fields. This means that it is we consider it a luxury field. So what do you think about what she is saying?
Would you repeat the question, please, again?
She says that it is like a pragmatics. It is a science without theory. So it is a luxury. She says that how can you convince me that
this is thank you so much. I mean, this is a quite challenging question. This is a counter argument for the title of today's lecture, which is stylistics a luxury? She says, no, stylistics is a luxury. Why? Because it doesn't provide an established set of theories. Okay, Dunya, her name is Dunya, right?
Yes, Dunya Ijam.
Okay, Dunya, please write down now the theories contributed by stylistics. Theory of foregrounding.
Yes.
Theory of defamiliarization.
Yes.
Theory of iconic image.
Yes.
Theory of schematic deviation.
Exactly.
Should I go more?
Parallelism.
Well, parallelism, this is not a theory, actually, Dr. Wafa, but this is a feature which is shared between stylistics and rhetoric.
Exactly.
But, you know, all these theories have been contributed by stylistics. So this most definitely will make stylistics a well-established discipline standing by itself. As for its status, which looks like pragmatics or semantics, or, well, sometimes this is not only stylistics problem, but this is a problem of the humanities in general.
So my question is this. Do you think,
Yeah.
let me ask maybe an IB question. Do you think that...
No, okay, all these questions are not naive, sorry. They are very fascinating and amazing.
Yeah, let me ask you this question. Do you think,
Right.
from my reading in stylistics, I think that stylistics has knocked down the pragmatic discourse analysis, all these linguistic things, or you call them history. What do you think? Has stylistics knocked them down? Has it annihilated them, or not yet?
Dr. Wafa, I don't know. Well, maybe it is because we are Iraqis that we are so, I mean, interested in using strong words and strong verbs. Knocking down, this is a very strong word, Dr. Wafa.
Yeah, because you know,
I wouldn't. Yes.
Yeah, from my reading, I found out that it is really invading every field of knowledge. It's invading.
Well, Dr. Wafa, let's not, viewing or picturing the situation as if there is a sort of struggle or conflict between stylistics, pragmatics, discourse analysis. It is not a struggle. It is a dialogue, a scientific dialogue. There is no one field that has knocked down another field, or there is no one field which is more scientific than another field. All these, this situation of interdisciplinarity is not only related to humanities. Now, take a look on the papers, academic papers written now in hard science, in biology, in physics. You know, you will find in the same paper researchers who have what? Background in physics, a second researcher co-authoring with the same person who have a background in chemistry, another in biology, another in, nanotechnology. So it is not a struggle. It is an integration between the contributions and the insights given by different fields of investigation.
Yeah, actually, stylistics, as I said in my presentation, stylistics is the bridge. Bridging the gap between linguistics and literary criticism.
Yes, I respect. I respect this metaphor. This is a very famous metaphor that looks at stylistics as a bridge between two isolated islands, one called linguistics, one called literature. But this bridge itself now is another island by itself.
Of course. Yeah, there is another question. What is the relationship between stylistics on one hand and linguistic analysis and literary criticism on the other? I think we have been talking about this all the way through now.
Yeah, this has been the topic of the whole lecture, I think. But the relation, remember, the relation is still an integration relation. Remember, well, in linguistics, what we got in linguistics, simply speaking, let me simplify everything. What we got in linguistics and what we got in literature. In linguistics, we got description, right?
Yes, of course.
In literature, we got what?
Aesthetic or artistic.
Well, interpretation. Okay, now since we have two elements, one is called description, the other is called interpretation. We need a systematic way to move from description to interpretation, or from interpretation to description. This systematic movement is called stylistics.
Oh yeah, yes, exactly. Okay. Another question. Parveen, what are the most important theories of linguistic style in pragmatic? This is out of the scope of our lecture, but let me repeat it for you. What are the most important theories of linguistic style in pragmatics? Linguistic style in pragmatics. What are the most important theories?
I can't get the question. Do we have something called? I've heard the question, but I think the question is wrongly phrased. Excuse me for saying this.
I think it's
do we have, what do you mean, linguistic styles in pragmatics?
Yeah. I think it's a strange question.
Well, the point is this. Let me understand the question in my way.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Let me understand the question in my own way. Maybe she's asking about the way we can use stylistics or linguistic stylistics in pragmatics. Remember, in pragmatics, we have speakers. Pragmatics is all about the intentional meaning of, or the intended meaning of speakers. We have an exchange, we have a dialogue, we have an interaction between different characters in a dramatic text. So sometimes you can take Hamlet, for example, and you need to describe, using the pragmatic theories, to describe the way Hamlet's holding the floor in the exchanges in his conversations with the other characters, with Horatio, for example, or with his uncle, or with his mom. And you can use the techniques or the description tools suggested by pragmatics to describe the way, or to, in fact, actually to characterize Hamlet's personality throughout the way he is holding or interfering in the conversations.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yes.
There is another commentary from Abdulhaq.
Yes.
He says that is, I think he is commenting on the idea that stylistics is a discipline. This is what I have arrived at from my presentation. He says that is because stylistics does really hold a firm position within linguistics. In fact, it is an advanced level of linguistics. It is advanced level of linguistics, stylistics.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abdulhaq, for having this view. And it is a very interesting view. It's true. I mean, why should we think that stylistics is an advanced level of practicing linguistics?
Exactly.
This is the question. You know why, Dr. Wafa? Because, you know, you wouldn't be in a position to use a linguistic theory or a linguistic technique to analyze a text without having a full knowledge of the linguistic theory first. Exactly. Right? I mean, now, if we can, I mean, how can we use, for example, Holliday's system of transitivity to analyze transitivity in one of James Joyce's short stories? I need first to have a full command of the theory of transitivity. I have to have a full knowledge of the theory first. And then after that, I will move into another more advanced level of practicing this theory and applying it over the text that I have chosen. So, of course, stylistics actually is an advanced level of practicing linguistics.
Exactly. Yes. Okay. I think we are done now with the question. It was very interesting, Dr. Khalid, and very special wallahi evening. Very interesting, inspiring evening. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be with
my
us
pleasure.
in this workshop. Yeah, it's our honor and pleasure again.
I've been honored, and thank you so much, Dr. Wafa, for this invitation. And please send my greetings to all of our colleagues in Al-Mosul University, starting from Dr. Baqsm up to the dean, up to the university chancellor. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Thank you. Good night to you too. Thank you so much. Dr. Ustad Muayyad, do you have anything to say?
No, just thank you both.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation.
And I would like to
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I would like to thank Muayyad. It is he who found you on net.
Thank you.
And it is he who introduced you to us.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, Doctor. Thank you, Dr. Baqsm. Thanks a lot for your feedback.